Yeah, hello, welcome everyone. I think we'll start the meeting at maybe 8:05, right? Yeah, we'll wait for everyone to join. So yeah, hello. So I think we'll continue the discussion on I think Jay's PR today as well, right? I think this is on MaxSec FIPS compliance. I shared the PR in the chat.
All right, thank you. Let me just see. Do we have? Okay, I think, yeah, we have quorum folks who are commenting on the PR. Let me share my screen.
Thanks, Jay.
All right, can you hear? Sorry, can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see. I can see this. Yeah.
Okay, so I will summarize the comments. They were mainly in three categories instead of going over line by line, and maybe we can go later on. The first comment was an older comment from Kamil, and his comment was that these these enums with the comments inside, they're kind of redundant. So I have not Kamil removed from the documentation, but from the code, if you see, I have removed them. I'll fix the document. Yeah, I'll fix the document as well. I'll make sure it's removed from everywhere. Yeah, it's the only documentation which is there. So that was our first comment. Second comment, I don't recall who made that comment. The second comment was that can the switch be queried whether it's FIPS compliant or not, right? Essentially, before we trigger post, can post be guarded by the capability query for the switch? So for this, I have added in the switch itself capability information, which is whether the switch is MACsec or IPsec compliant. And this is just the read-only attributes and can be read as using a regular GET API to see whether it's compliant. And there is a workflow also introduced in the document. Let me just see, where is the capability query? Yeah, so there is, sorry, there's still a typo in this. This section should be 4.0. This also, I'll fix it. So we can use the capability query sci query attribute capability for a given attribute, whether it's supported or not. uh, actually, this is kind of redundant now that I'm looking at it again. Whether a switch can support IPsec or MACsec can be queried by just by these attributes. My apologies. This is really not needed. I didn't think it through. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I thought my connection. So yeah, so this looks like redundant information. I really don't think that's needed. I added on it. So yeah, so on a switch, we can query the trigger attribute, the enable post attribute, whether this attribute is supported or not. And this in itself will tell whether the switch supports MACsec post or not. I don't think we really need these attributes. We should not have these attributes. I'll just put remove FIPS compliant attribute, since query can be done on enable post to find out if it supports MACsec and or IPsec post. Okay, so this I will take care of it. Okay, so that was one in the workflow. I have added it, but I added with the right attributes, and these attributes should not have been there. So that was the second comment. The third comment was if let's see, yeah, if the post can be run at a switch level, right? So for that also, I have added similar attributes, and there's a workflow also. So at IPsec level, now you have switch level, you have a post status for both MACsec and IPsec. And correspondingly, you have a read value for the status, right? And then there is a callback, okay, for both IP. So pretty much same set of attributes which were there for IPsec, MACsec engine, status and callback and trigger, they have been also created for the switch. Now, when the system, before the system comes up, NOS can query whether a given uh, implementation supports post at a switch level, right, or at a MACsec level. And based on that, it can take the further actions. So this also I have captured. Okay, and I'll go through the document a bit in detail. Last comment I think came in from Dipankar, and that was a little bit different. And it talked about specific hardware implementation, and the implementation there could be, and that's a valid use case as well, where system does not need any interaction with the user. It's pretty much hardwired. When you do the power on, the first thing which happens in the system is the post, right? So in that, the behavior could be that system comes up, and the only thing NOS is interested in is what is the status of the post, which happened automatically. So in that case, really the trigger is not there. And one thing which gets a little bit interesting there also, how you find out whether the system even has a post engine or not, or is FIPS compliant or not. I think that can be done, but that's a very constrained hardware design. And I had brief discussion with Dipankar that there are other ways to solve it. But before we go, Dipankar, did I understood the problem, your comment correctly?
Not exactly. I believe this approach can be taken with any hardware design. My argument really was that um, post is a function that needs to be performed before you can enable MACsec on a port. That is the fundamental requirement for FIPS compliance, right? Now, if you say the system is FIPS compliant, now this can be done anytime. The post can be done anytime before it's enabled. So there is no specific reason for NOS to control this. The hardware implementation and the drivers supplied by the vendor are closely tied together. And the vendor supplies normally initialization files to initialize this hardware for the system, right? For their delivered hardware for the system. So why not leave it in the hands of the vendor to when to run the FIPS and assume that it can be done during one of the initialization events, either during the switch initialization or in the security engine initialization, right? And as long as it is done in any one of those two windows, our flow requires in Psi and MACsec, our flow require, and IPsec, a flow requires that the switch initialization and the MACsec function initialization happen before a port can be enabled, right? So it meets the FIPS requirement. It can be implemented by the vendor that provides the MACsec and IPsec hardware. And there is no NOS involvement. There is no call to run the FIPS. You may want to run the FIPS at other times for diagnostics purposes, but that can be left for diagnostics, essentially. The standard FIPS compliance part can be completed without more complicating the NOS. And with
So Dipankar, I
API
understand what you're saying, right? But as I talked initially, that we have a requirement where we want to have explicit control, right? Does not mean that what you are saying cannot happen. In that case, system can be queried for, whether the post, you know, can be just queried for a status, that only status is supported, but the trigger is not supported, right?
Yeah, that would, in my mind, that's a safer approach, because if you do not expose a trigger, which is only needed for diagnostics purposes, then there is less issues of sequencing, timing, the flow by which you have to enable, and so on, right?
No, I think trigger is needed. That's at least me talking to, other implementations. I have been told that, trigger is a good idea. Okay, now a given implementation may not support a trigger, and it can happen independently during the init time, system init boot time, right? That's perfectly okay. But I think that having a trigger is probably a better idea to cover the various implementations. The only thing which we can do is, which if you see here on the triggers, right? Trigger was done as a modifiable entity, meaning that once the post is complete, system is up and running, you can again trigger a post. And this was run mainly for diagnostic purposes. So if we agree that, okay, we don't want to do that, then one thing which we can create a little bit more stricter boundary is set this as a create only.
Oh, that would be sufficient. That is what I meant. I did not mean that you do not have an ability to enable or disable. What I meant was that you do not allow the ability to time it arbitrarily. Yeah.
Yeah. So that you can do. So what it will do is create only attributes. By definition are when the objects are created, these attributes will be created, and we can just change that And when create happens, so in that case, if the system is compliant, then this create will trigger the post automatically with the creation of the object. And I think that will solve what you are saying.
Yes, yes. And now if you allow that for both switch level and Maxec engine level, then
Correct.
you have to define a dependency between the two, though. Right.
You don't have to define, then you can just query that before even switch create happens, right? That this system operates at a engine level or at a switch level.
No, I'm confused. So you have a Maxec switch attribute IPsec in a post enable, okay? And if you have a Maxec attribute or IPsec attribute is post enable, now if the user sets one and does not set the other, what happens?
So, I mean, this probably you might be familiar. We have the concept of hierarchy. We use it for, a lot of attributes like tunnels, etc., which can be configured at a fine grain level or at a coarse grain. So, in case of a switch, and I can add that comment to clarify. Actually, I have added that. It's kind of
That's all I was saying. You have to define whether it's both have to be enabled, or if one enabled, it happens, and so on, right? So
yeah. I think it's a little bit maybe cryptic. I can expand the comment.
okay.
Right. Yeah. So okay, I think that's so change the flats to create only, and this is actually a bigger comment. I'll to create only.
But then Jay, one quick question, I think. So we have two variables, right? Like attributes like enable post, one on the switch level and one on the maxac level, right? Like engine level.
Right.
So if it's at the create only level, so when you create the switch, that's fine. We understand that. I think it'll do while creating it. But does the same happen when you do a create for the maxac engine?
No. I mean, you can create
How?
it, and the default value remains false. So in that case, it will remain false
Okay, unless you set it. Okay.
unless you set it to true, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just thinking these two controls were still there, right? So while creating, we have this control of, okay, so default is false. So if you don't modify it and we play it around at the switch level, we should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also adapter implementation will also help you there. Let's say by accidentally, let's say you also enabled it at switch, at engine level, and that system supports at a switch level, then adapter will return error. It won't let you set it.
Okay, because we are doing it already on the switch level.
You have
Okay.
already
So that
done
sort
at
of
switch
logic we
level.
need to have it. Mhm. Thanks.
So is
So
there
so if you set this to be create only level, does that mean that this enable post will automatically be run when the switch is initialized?
No, unless you change the default value to true.
To true. Okay, so you still need to be triggered by the loss to
Correct.
enable the post.
Correct. The only thing is now it is sort of we have put a stricter boundary, meaning that when the object creation happens and if the system need to run post, then we are mandating that please do go and create this attribute also. And not only create this attribute with a value of true. So it's a little bit of a stricter boundary when the system is booting up.
Okay, yeah, because in our the chassis, right? We have it can be into the FIPS enabled state or FIPS disabled state, right? So in most of the case, our FIPS is not enabled for the chassis because we are not required that strict the FIPS requirement. So we need to make a decision at the loss level after reboot is do we need the post test, right? If the FIPS is not enabled, we don't even need to bother to run any post test.
Correct. Yeah, and that you will achieve by just creating this. And also, this is not mandatory, right? There is also a concept of mandatory. This is not mandatory, right? But if you create, then create will happen with default as false, right? If the chassis is not enabled for FIPS. And then if the chassis is unable for FIPS, then NOS can come and set this attribute as true. The only difference it will do that if you want to change for any reason back to, disable posts or back to false or whatever, there is no such thing. Then you have to essentially reboot the system. Runtime, you will
okay.
not be able to control this attribute.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. My another question is let's say we enable the post, right? And for any of the reason, this post test finally the callback give us the failed information. So what would be the behavior after this? Is that you will disable the hardware will automatically disable MaxSec engine if this post is not success? So
okay, I will need help from experts here. I think that's again an implementation detail, in my opinion, that how a given hardware takes action and post disables.
Hardware will disable the MaxSec engine. If it's post-enabled, post fails, hardware must disable the MaxSec engine. It should not be an option. It cannot be an option.
Yeah, so that's what I expected, because after this is disabled, then any kind of the MaxSec configuration will result in the failure, right? Because there's something need to be done on the hardware to blocking this kind of configuration to be successfully.
Correct. It will drop packets. It will drop packets that need MaxSec service, that needs MaxSec, but it will pass packets that do not need MaxSec, means that do not require any encryption.
Yes. For regular traffic, we are okay. Only the MaxSec won't get even from configuration level, won't pass. Okay. Yeah.
Correct.
Then that's what we expected.
And that control will be in the FIPS compliant layer of SDK above the hardware. So there's a FIPS compliant layer of SDK above the hardware that will be hardened, means that will be signed, authenticated, and that cannot be changed.
Okay, so that's what my follow-up question would have been. So when you say hardware, it is not the NOS responsibility, but
it's when we call, exactly.
It's
so
hardware,
we have to change the definition of hardware in this context. When we talk about hardware in FIPS context, it is not just hardware. It is hardware plus firmware plus a layer of SDK. That together is kind of, you can put a shrink wrap around that whole thing and say, okay, that's the one that FIPS will stamp and say, this is sealed now. This whole box, this whole shrink wrapped object is sealed, and you cannot change anything. If you change anything there, you will have to go and recertify. So in that shrink wrapped layer of SDK or firmware, it will run post, and if it fails, it will disable or drop packets that require MaxSec or IPsec services, respectively. Okay, so that's the one. Yeah, it is not pure hardware. It's hardware, firmware, software that is FIPS compliant, quote unquote, FIPS certified.
So I have one question. If we request a post at the switch level, right? And subsequently, if we query post status at an engine level, what should be the expectation?
Yeah, so I think, that's a good question. There is another layer to that question. So the status at a switch level will give you at an aggregate status at a switch level. It won't tell you if any specific engine failed, right? It will just say pass or fail. Now, to know, let's say if there is a need to know a specific engine, if which one of the engines which are there in the system fail, then NOS has to do two things. First, it still has to query the MaxSec object for the given engine, right? Without that, you cannot query the attribute. And once it's created, right, on that engine, then since this is a read-only attribute, right? So hardware already has a state, then NOS can query this attribute to find out what's the status of this MaxSec engine or IPsec engine. And it has to do for all the engines present on the system.
Okay, so basically on a per engine basis, we could query.
You have to run a loop, right? Right. Okay, and
But again,
sorry, go ahead.
no, but again, what is the behavior if there is a partial failure, or that can that happen? I'm just trying to see if
What
there
is
is a
partial
possibility.
behavior? Partial
Like,
failure?
for example, some of the Maxec engines is okay, but there is a failure on one of the engine. What should be the behavior there?
It is
Like the switch level, we are okay.
It is
Okay.
implementation dependent. At least the Maxec engine that has failed must behave the way we just discussed before. That means that engine must must drop all packets that require Maxec services and should pass all packets that do not require Maxec services, at least that engine. Now, some implementation may decide to not provide Maxec services to the entire engine because of the implementation. The Maxec may have been implemented in a shared fashion. So that means even though it fails on one engine, that is the implementation may decide to disable Maxec service on the engine or on the whole chip. Means none of the engines will work. The reason is because the rationale there could be, hey, I do not have any confidence on my chip anymore. It is either compromised or it's not functioning. Even if one port is bad, I do not know why that port is bad, so I'm going to shut off Maxec here to be completely FIPS compliant. So it's how strict they want to enforce it, but I don't believe FIPS mandates. Only thing FIPS mandates is the engine that failed must not provide any Maxec services. But after that, you can expand that to all ports of the engine or the whole chip with all the engines. That's implementation dependent. You can be very conservative, moderately conservative, or very strict. I mean, depends on how you want to implement, as long as you are FIPS compliant.
Okay. That might cause some inconsistency in the behavioral switch, right? I think so. Some ports will be Maxec enabled, some won't be. So yeah. So it's implemented
Well,
specific, but
no.
good.
If it is Maxec, if the port is not Maxec, port not Maxec enabled, then there is no Maxec services, as I said, right?
Yeah, few ports won't send Maxec encrypted traffic, right? That's what happened. So the FIPS didn't pass for their engine, so the ports under that will just send plain traffic. It won't.
No. Only Maxec services, I said, right? So if a port is not Maxec enabled, that means it is not providing any Maxec services, so it will pass all the packets, right? And it won't depend on FIPS result. This, whatever I said, affects only the ports that are Maxec enabled and have to run post. Even if their post passed, you may disable Maxec services because some other port, either in that engine or some other engine in that switch, has failed Maxec services. So you may not have confidence in Maxec at all, and you may decide to have no confidence on Maxec and may declare that my Maxec is compromised or something is compromised here. So I'm going to disable Maxec and I'm not going to encrypt because I don't trust it. So
actually, my question is on if I trigger post using the switch level operation, right? And say it fails because some of the engines. So is it fair to expect that the callback notification will say that the switch level Maxec status is failed? And
yes.
Okay, and then what Shantanu said still applies. It is still an implementation decision whether some engines will be left enabled and some will be disabled even in that scenario, or are we taking a stance that if somebody requested at a switch level and it failed, that it has to fail everywhere?
See, SciSpec cannot force that, right? So
Okay.
the way it will happen in this case is, you trigger the post at a switch level, callback comes, post fails. So NOS knows. Now, take an example, right? What natural configuration sequence, what will happen? All the post fail, let's say there is a configuration sitting which will create the Maxec engine and start creating port objects MACsec ports and attributes. If the implementation disables everything on the system, right, all the MACsec engine, then everything will fail, right? All kind of object creation, setting the attributes, not object creation, setting the attributes, etc., they will start failing. Now, what you are asking, is there a way for NOS to know what is the behavior of an implementation? Is it disabling everything or it's disabling partial? I mean, that's a good question. So I will ask in turn that probably NOS would like to know, right, whether what's the hardware, what's the implementation behavior is. Is that correct?
Can I actually point something out? So I think the complexity comes from doing this two different ways, and then now you have to define different hardware behavior underneath it, right? So if somebody wants we say that this is a create only attribute, then the enabling it at switch level, the behavior is no different than enabling it for every security engine. So if you want security engine granularity for enabling post, why not leave it at security engine level and just write one line of documentation? If you want to do it at switch level, you have to make sure that you enable it for every security engine. And in that case, all ambiguity goes away. The failure is reflected in the security engine. The enabling is at the security engine granularity. And
No, Dipankar, that's not the concern.
Okay.
That's not the concern, right? The concern is that same argument, you can put it at a MACsec port level, right? If only one port is compromised and fails, but other port does not, then what do you do, right? Same argument, you can put it further down. The concern is that if an implementation decides to disable all the MACsec engine, if single, as Shantanu was explaining, if single MACsec engine fails.
Okay, you're saying there is a failure granularity question. It is not
a failure. You're right. Now, my question is that something of, see, you can eventually derive that information in a long and wieldy way, right?
Yeah.
But is there a need to know this information in a more, deterministic and a query kind of?
You can have an attribute kind of, right? Saying that, hey, disabling is at the port level, engine level, or switch level, means how conservative it is, right? I mean, that will tell, basically the description would be, I will report, even if you are enabling, does not matter how you're enabling, I'll report you the status at each port level, or I will report you failure for the entire engine, even if one port fails, or I'll report you failure at the whole switch, even if one port has failed. So that would be the
Shantanu, how it's done, we will come to that, right? That's okay. Something.
It may be diagnostic. It may be more informational for the NOS, because NOS cannot do much if the implementation decides to disable all MACsec services on all ports. It just tells that I'm going to do that. So that's just for information, right? If somebody wants to know. Right.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's mainly for informational. My question is that see, today we don't provide that information. Today that information needs to be derived. Okay.
Correct.
Is there a need to provide that information in a more explicit way? And if yes, then we will do some enhancement in spec. I'll think it towards the cleanest way to go about. And that information can be provided.
And I would think, as long as we have the ability to query the engine for status, right? As this scenario would be, if it's passed, then you assume it's passed on all the engines. If it's failed, whoever wants more information, query specific engines.
Yeah, so I think, that's one way to go about it, because you will get the deterministic information there, but you have to run a loop.
Right. It's more a diagnostic after it fails.
Correct.
What you do. Yeah.
Correct. But again, do you want to know whether the engine, although for that the post has passed, does it forwarding traffic or not? Because it may not be forwarding traffic.
Or you mean to say it has passed for a specific engine, but it's still not going to provide a MACsec service? Is that
Correct? Yes.
so? I guess if an implementation can make it clear that failed means failed versus failed means only some engines are providing service. And my guess is the question is, do we mandate it, right? That failed means failed and all, or do we leave it to implementation?
Correct.
I mean,
So right now, spec
if it's
is empty.
mandated, there is clarity, but do we need to go that far?
Yeah. So today, spec has left it to implementation. There is nothing which spec says that on a fail status, what should happen, right? And that could be release noted for a given system, etc. That's the way we have gone today. And my question is, do you want to be a little bit more hardbound on that?
I mean, the only question is there anything from a FIPS compliance point of view that gets in the way if it is failed, but some engines still provide MACsec service? If it's not going to be, if you're still going to be not in violation of anything for FIPS, then I think you can leave it to implementation. Whereas if somebody is going to interpret fails in a certain way and then finds out later that some engines are still providing service, then
I don't think FIPS recognizes the concept of engine, shared engine, or switch level. It's just the port that is supposed to provide MACsec services, whether that port has passed or not. It's like a individual instance of MACsec, right? For that port. That's how the spec will see it, like how IEEE will see it, right? Dipankar, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think from FIPS perspective you are in violation if you take a if you find that a port has failed and if you inherit that failed property to all ports shared by that engine, sharing that engine or the entire chip. You will not be, I don't believe you will be in any violation. So it's up to you, right? So it depends on your implementation, how you have implemented it. Your databases, for example, could be shared across engines, security association. That could be one implementation possible, in which case you might want to fail everything. So it's completely implementation based, how much you are sharing. And I don't think FIPS talks about sharing that level.
Yeah,
so
I would agree on a more conservative the treatment of this failure, right? Because from FIPS point of view, if any kind of the engine or any port has is not passing the post test, that normally indicate there's a big security or issue in that switch, right? So even disabling the MACsec for all of the engines, I would like that's more FIPS prefer to do, because we know normally that shouldn't happen, but if that happen, we make it a more conservative way to just blocking all the traffic for this chassis should be the way that the make FIPS to be think is the correct way to do. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, but we can decide at the chassis level. That again is NOS dependent because it's at best you can do at the chip level. But again, the boundary exactly at what level you could potentially make it implementation dependent. If the implementation guarantees that it has completely separated out ports, like it could be a port level 5, it could be just a 5. So it knows it has independent port level implementation. It's possible for low speed PHYs, but for high speed PHYs, it starts more and more sharing. So as long as it fails the port that has failed post, at the minimum it does that, and then it could be way more conservative than that, and and then above that is the NOS layer. NOS can fail the complete chassis. If it sees any port has failed, it can say, I am not going to provide any, I'm going to drop all MACsec packets, period, in this whole chassis for across all ships. That could be even a NOS decision, right? So yeah, I mean, it's for diagnostic purposes that you might want to know exactly how conservative is this FIPS compliant, MACsec or IPsec is, which includes the hardware and the FIPS compliant firmware, FIPS compliant SDK layer, all that shrink wrap thing, how conservative it is. So you might want to query, and that's for just diagnostic purposes or knowledge, but it has to be FIPS compliant. The minimum conservative level is port level. The ports that have failed must not provide MACsec or IPsec services. That should be the minimum requirement.
Okay. Yeah. So my last question. So any side API to query the how many MACsec engines are with a switch? Do we have a way to query?
Jay, you have to take that question.
Oh, sorry. Well, I didn't realize question was for me. What's the question?
I said is the, for example, if I'm going to query which MACsec engine has a failure, right? It's failed. So is there side API already to query the list of MACsec engines with a certain switch? So does this kind of API already exist? Because I want to know in my switch how many MACsec engines are there, right? Then I can do a for loop to query each one.
Correct,
So
correct. Yeah, so I think, let me see the file. Most probably you do. So this, let me just go there. Here it is. So this is the list of uh, objects, but it does not get populated on its own, right? So as we create the MACsec objects for individual list, then this list gets populated, right? As part of the create process. And then you can go about like either querying this, or as we are creating the object itself, you can query right there. So either one is okay.
okay.
Most probably when you're creating the object, once the object create is complete, the first thing you can do is what's the status of the post.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, because this list is not automatically populated by the adapter. This list is populated by NOS, right? And I think your question is that if how many engines are there, let me see if there is number of engines. I don't think. Shantanu, not Shantanu, Dipankar, you did the original MACsec proposal. Do you recall how do you find how many engines are there in the system?
I don't think so. I think you could have to walk the list of engines.
That is the list which gets populated when you create, right?
Yes.
So, but how does NOS know that how many engines are present in the system?
I do not have a clue, actually. I don't remember actually having supported multiple engines in a ASIC. I thought that when we started on this.
I mean, that's a good question because I didn't see it either. Let's just quickly. So this is we introduced it. This is the object list which is already there, and that's about it. That's all I saw. This is notifications which we have added. Notifications we have added. This is all stuff we have added. Yeah, I didn't see anywhere that how typically, any kind of these instances of are present, we provide ability to query. Yeah, sorry, I don't think current specification can tell you how many engines are there in the specification.
Okay, but at least we can walk through. They have an engine list that's corresponding to MACsec object. in this API, right?
But that's something which you have to create. So you as a NOS has to create,
Create. Okay.
So
right? And the question is chicken and egg, that how do you know how many objects to create if you don't know how many engines are
Yeah.
there?
so so full confession, at the risk of confusing people, at the as far as I remembered, we only had one MACsec object per switch,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
one IPsec
Yeah.
object per switch. It was just a conceptual object. It was not mapped into security engines in any way. And some I do not know. Somehow we ended up with a list of security engines. I don't remember whether I did it or somebody else did it later. Do not know. But the only reason for having having a separate MACsec object is because it could be also instantiated in PHYs, and each of which was instantiated as a separate ASIC, right? So a system could have switch ASIC, an embedded MACsec, or external PHYs with embedded MACsec. And there would be different ASICs and different MACsec objects.
So do we really need to do anything to remedy this, or you think we're just happy querying the switch status and then rely on failure to create MACsec objects later if there was a real failure on post?
I mean, we are at it if there is an implementation which supports such, so many MACsec engines, then it's fairly easy to add. We add another attribute which says MACsec, max IPsec engines or MACsec engines, like that, right? So, and then what NOS can do, query that value, and it says that there are 4 hardware instances are present. Then it run a loop for 4 create, right? And then those creates will get binded to this object list in the switch. So it's doable. I mean, it's all is there. See, I full disclaimer, I'm not an expert in this domain, right? I'm an expert with a little bit of a reading and gathering information from the experts. It's doable. Today's spec is incomplete.
Yeah, but I think briefly with this new switch level that the post supported in the site, so I think I'm okay with the with that, right? Because that give me the lot of simplicity to implementing at the solid level. Is the loss level to implement that. The logic will be very simple and straightforward. Right? We just enable it at the switch level, depending on FIPS is enabled or not, and then we just waiting for the callback and handle. If the callback gives us success, everything's fine. If it's failure, we mark a logging, significant logging marking the FIPS is failed, and then we know the MACsec engine is already get disabled. So then no MACsec will be functioning at this switch. So I think with this I'm fine with this implementation. It's very, very good for me.
So we don't need to worry about how many MACsec engines are there?
Yeah, because to me, I don't want to enter that granularity to see which one. Yeah, if it's one failed, then I will mark the whole chassis at the switch level. The FIPS is not compliant, then that's it, right? Because normally that shouldn't happen. Why? It's a shared library. Then why the one engine failed and another engine succeeded? That should indicate something significantly wrong inside the NDK. Then we need to fix it, right? We just mark it as a total failure for FIPS.
Correct.
So that should be okay.
Okay, so if we have a consensus on that, then I will leave that as is.
Yeah, I think they make the life easier, and the code code as simple as possible at the loss level is the best for us.
Yeah, but also, I mean, just for completeness sake, we can introduce the new attribute, and you can just ignore it, right?
Mhm.
We can add the attribute for the number of engines in the system, and you don't have to worry about it. Your logic of operating at switch level still remains, right? That's
Yes.
another. It will just make the spec complete. Right now, spec is incomplete in that sense. But I will take it only if there's an input. Otherwise, I won't change. I leave it for folks who encounter this problem later on.
But if there are multiple engines anyway, you share that list concept, right? The maxx object list. There could be we could use that, right, as well to loop through and see the status per.
No, but how do you
Because
know that?
currently,
The problem is
Mhm.
that that list is actually created by the NOS, right? How does NOS know that how many elements should be there in the list? It's not something which is populated by adapter. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, but currently, okay, at least what I see in Sonic implementation is we just create one object. We don't separate as engines or anything. But if we think it's like phi specific, if you're implementing on the phi and if we have multiple objects, there will be a list of objects in the list. So I was just thinking if we can loop through that to see the status per object, right?
No,
If we have the
which is
post
true.
enabled status.
You're absolutely right. But this list will get created when NOS creates these maxsec objects, right? Each maxsec engine on a phi will get a maxsec object, and then this list
Yes.
will get populated, right? So this list is
Right.
actually a manual operation by the NOS, right? It's not a read only; it's a create and set, right?
Yeah, Judy,
So
it's just like a chicken egg,
it's a chicken and egg
issue.
problem.
Yeah, because
Exactly.
we don't know how many engines are there. Then
Right.
we cannot
Okay.
create a list at first level.
Right.
So
Right. So it's easy to solve, right? All we do is add another attribute which says how many number of maxsec engines are there, right? That's fairly easy to add. And if folks give me feedback that yes, please add it, then I'll add it. It's not a big deal. But as I said, I am not a subject matter expert to make that call. And it's, in my opinion, if you ask me, that it's really not a big deal. Adding that attribute makes the spec incomplete. Right now, there is a gap in the spec. While we are at it, we just add it. It does not change anything. If the flow, FIPS compliant flow, we want it at a switch level, you get a callback, failure happens, and the entire chassis is disabled. As a FIPS, entire switch chassis is disabled as a switch FIPS uncompliant. This attribute, what we're going to add, has no implications on that workflow. So okay, so I think stop at that. I'm trying to steal 5 minutes for me if I can. So do we want another round of so okay, I'm going to add that attribute, the number of engines attribute for both IPsec and MACsec. At least the spec will be completed. It does not impact anything else. I have taken note of Dipankar, your feedback of making the attribute as create only. Okay, I'll update the documents, clean the document. And there was another comment I have taken, which was, I think I have the notes, so I'll take care of it. Let me remember. Yeah, so create only, and then yeah, the FIPS compliant attribute, I have to remove that. That's a redundant information. It's really not needed. So okay, so I will do that, and if we need another round of review, we can meet next week, or we can do it on just on emails on the web. Okay, that's all I have for
Okay.
today.
Yeah, sounds good. I think we'll put comments on the PR, right? I think we'll start with that. If you have more comments, we'll probably meet again next week then. Yeah,
Right,
we can
right.
follow up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for feedback and helping me on this. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll sign off. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.